Ceann Crowley post take questions 1 and 2 together. The Seanad Reform Implementation Group, chaired by Senator McDougall, submitted their report to me on the 20th of December 2018. The report was also published online, and copies of the report and draft bill issued to all members of the Oireachtas. I'm very grateful to Senator McDougall and all the members of the group for their work in producing a report. The report also includes 4 statements of position from various groups outlining their position where they did not completely agree with the recommendations of the report. These dissenting statements were from Senator Batchick, McDougall and Grealish, setting out their position on the higher education constituency, from Sinn Féin setting out their position that further reforms should be made by constitutional change and how they could facilitate a modern, diverse and democratic Seanad, from Senator Tommy Brune on behalf of the Independents for Change, indicating their opposition to reform Seanad and stating that they favoured a unicameral option. In the absence of this, he and his group favour constitutional change and the Seanad being elected by universal suffrage, and the Seanad and Dáil being elected on the same day. And also a dissenting opinion from Senators Ria Byrne, Paddy Burke, Jerry Buttimer and Gabby McFadden on behalf of Fine Gael, calling for constitutional change as well, while being supportive of Seanad reform more generally. They don't believe that the final report will enhance the working of the Dáil. The report will be considered by Cabinet shortly.
Reform of the Seanad is like draining the Shannon and the restoring of the Irish language. It is a permanent agenda item, Ceann Crowley, and I think the default position of everybody is set up another review. We had a very comprehensive review chaired by former Senator Maurice Manning. That review has now been reviewed by another all-party group led by another very distinguished parliamentarian, Senator McDougall, and that 130-page report is before the Cabinet. Just so that we can actually deal with the issue, is it the government's intention to actually decide on a set of reforms that will be implemented in advance of the next Seanad election? Is it your view that the general 130-page report submitted before Christmas to you by Senator McDougall is the basis for those change? Do you accept the conclusions that there should be an open franchise to all Irish passport holders abroad, as well as people in Northern Ireland, to vote on the panel? And when, in real time frame, can we expect real decisions to be made, even if the decision is that you're not going to make any reforms this side of a Seanad election?
Ceann Crowley, Taoiseach, this issue in terms of Seanad reform has been going on and on and on and on, and we need to get to a decision point, as has been mentioned by Deputy Howlin. We've had review after review. We've had the Manning report. We now have the review, the Seanad Reform Implementation Group, which met last May in their first meeting, produced their report, a very lengthy report, and produced a piece of legislation that they claim would give effect to the Manning report and the recommendations contained there within. That legislation, I understand, is with you, Taoiseach. What I would like to know is whether that legislation is ever going to see the light of day. Is it your intention to bring that legislation to Cabinet? Is it your intention to amend that legislation? Is it your intention to scrap that legislation? Can you give this House a time frame in relation to when we will see something of substance, when if that legislation is the vehicle that is to be utilised to bring about the Seanad reform that is required? What is the time frame for introducing that before the House? And if it is not, what is Plan B from the Government, or indeed from your point of view as Taoiseach in this state? Deputy Martin.
I think behind the McDowell Group's report, I think there's a very clear and hard reality which they point to in their statement, that there is effectively no way of preparing such a massive scheme for a new national and international election during the lifetime of the Oireachtas. I think that's clear. I think the next general election would involve, it seems to me, from a practical perspective, the same system as we currently have in terms of electing, obviously, the Dáil, but also the Senate. The group's mandate was to propose an approach to implementing the Manning report, and it has accomplished this. Can the Taoiseach outline what measures he proposes to take to add any extra detail on the core challenges, for example, of registering the electorate, protecting the integrity of the ballot, and ensuring that the public will be in a position to both understand the process and actively engage with the election? There has been a proposal to hold a referendum on reform of the electorate for the office of Oireachtas and Éireann. I think that's been delayed for practical reasons. I actually think we need perhaps a better debate on that in the House in terms of extending of the franchise, if we're honest, in terms of the detail of that, how is that accomplished, who will be entitled to vote, and the whole idea of no taxation without representation, although that's an old concept in many ways. There are issues there that we do need to re-interrogate, I think, rather than just saying it glibly without the detail. And it seems to me at all points, Taoiseach, to the need for an electoral commission to be established. Because I would have thought that the establishment of an electoral commission, which has been long promised by the government, would over time give one the capacity to go into detail on these questions and to come forward with practical logistical responses to the obvious logistical problems and consequences of the recommendations of this report.
Taoiseach.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to, first of all, once again, thank Senator McDougall and the members of the Houses who took part in the group, who produced a very detailed report and also provided us with draft legislation to bring it forward. The group recommended, in fact, that the next Seanad should be elected in the same way as the current one. So part of their recommendation was that any changes should not apply to the next Seanad election, but should apply to the one thereafter. And I accept that for practical purposes, that if we do make a major reform, it would apply not at the next Seanad election, but the one thereafter, given the need to establish an electoral commission and so many other things. It is also worth noting that the report was not agreed by consensus. There were dissenting opinions attached to the report from Fine Gael, from Sinn Féin and from the Independents for Change, all advocating that we should go further and consider constitutional change. The legislation is now available. It is up to the government, or indeed any party or any member of this House, to bring that legislation to the floor of the House for a debate and a vote. So that is not something that is solely under the control of the government. Any member can bring that legislation to the floor should they wish to do so. Cabinet hasn't discussed it yet. It is on the agenda, and we do intend to discuss it. My own view, but this is not the view of government because we haven't discussed it at Cabinet yet, but my own view is that I have reservations about it. I have reservations about it on a number of levels, which I've spoken about already in this chamber. The first, that diminishes the role of councillors and local authority members, and I know many people in this House will not want that to be the case. It reduces the number of seats that are elected by local authority members very considerably and diminishes their role as a result. And secondly, it requires everyone in the country to register to vote again for Seanad elections. Well, not even just everyone in the country, every Irish citizen in the world who wants to register to vote and would have to choose which one of 6 panels they would like to vote on. A university one, admin, education, culture, industrial, commercial, labour, everyone will know them. I have reservations about that, and that we may find huge numbers of people not registering at all, not wanting to be part of this. Huge numbers may register for one panel but not another, and I think that would create a problem. If you had 100,000 people registering for one panel but maybe only 20,000 for another. And I think a further problem is the panels themselves, which I understand derive from a papal encyclical in the 1930s, which don't represent, I believe, the 21st century. No panel dealing with science and technology, for example, but one dealing with administration. Nothing dealing with sport. So those are my reservations, and I've explained to the House before, but hasn't been discussed at Cabinet yet, and that's not the form view of the government. But as I say, it is open to any party who wishes to advance this to put that legislation before the House for a debate, and that is within the rights of any party that wants to make this happen, to put that legislation forward and to have a second stage debate and vote on it. In terms of extending the franchise for presidential elections, I want to say that's something that I really strongly believe in and I'm committed to, and I want us to have that referendum in October. Our proposal is that all Irish citizens, no matter where they may live in the world, will be entitled to register to vote and vote for the next president. They will have to register to vote. It would be a postal ballot for those not living in this state, and would not be linked to having a passport, because of course a passport is a travel document, and there are many people who are Irish citizens who don't have a passport, or their passport may be expired. So it will be linked to citizenship rather than passport. And while I appreciate the argument around no taxation without representation, I understand that argument in relation to the Dáil, because of course the Dáil does set our taxes and does pass legislation which applies to people who are resident here. I think the presidency is different. The president doesn't set our taxes, and the president doesn't make laws. And I think it's a very different office. And I would like to see a presidency for the 21st century that's different to the one currently and represents the Irish nation and not just the Irish state, and is elected by all citizens.
The current presidency represents the nation rather well.